I never thought it would come to this. My name is Opal, and I'm 62 years old. Just 3 days ago, I collapsed during a faculty meeting at Riverside Elementary, where I've been teaching for 27 years. When I opened my eyes in the hospital, the first person I asked for was my son James. The nurse told me they'd called him hours ago. He never showed up. Instead, my daughter-in-law posted something online that changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for what my daughter-in-law did while I was fighting for my life. 5 years ago, I lost my husband Robert to a sudden stroke. We'd been married for 32 beautiful years. After his passing, James became my rock. We'd always been close, but during my grief, we grew even closer. Every Sunday, he'd come over for dinner. We'd watch old movies together, just like when he was a kid. He helped me navigate life without Robert, from fixing leaky faucets to helping me understand my retirement options. That all changed 3 years ago when James married Tiffany. At first, I was thrilled. James deserved happiness, and I genuinely tried to welcome her into our family. I hosted their engagement party, helped with wedding preparations, and even gifted them my grandmother's antique pearl necklace for Tiffany to wear on their wedding day. The shift in our relationship wasn't immediate. It happened gradually, like a slowly dimming light. First, those Sunday dinners became monthly, then occasional, then rare special events. James always had excuses. Ready work was busy. They had other commitments they were saving for a house down payment. I understood. Young couples need their space. But I started noticing strange patterns. Whenever James and I made plans, they'd often get canceled last minute. There was always some emergency or unexpected event that Tiffany needed James for. When we did manage to get together, Tiffany would constantly interrupt our conversations, steering topics away from family memories or anything that predated her arrival in our lives. "Mom, Tiffany doesn't want to hear those old stories again," James would say, though I'd never shared them with her before. The thing that bothers me most is how I started to doubt myself. Was I being too clingy? Was I the stereotypical mother-in-law unable to let go? I bent over backward trying to connect with Tiffany. I remembered her favorite foods, asked about her work, and never criticized their decisions, even when I disagreed. Last year, when they mentioned struggling to save for a house, I offered them my biggest gesture of love. The 4-bedroom house where James grew up, where Robert and I had built our life together, was sitting mostly empty. I suggested they move in temporarily while saving for their own place. It was my property fully paid off, and Robert had left it to me in his will. I even moved to a small rental apartment to give them complete privacy. "It's just until we save enough for a down payment," James assured me. "Maybe a year tops." I was happy to help them start their lives together, but soon I felt like a stranger in what had once been my home. When I'd visit, Tiffany would make comments about changes she wanted to make. The kitchen was outdated. The wallpaper in the master bedroom was hideous. The garden was too much maintenance. Pieces of furniture that held precious memories for me began disappearing, replaced with modern items. "We need to make it feel like our home, Mom," James explained when I noticed my grandmother's dining table was gone. "Tiffany has great taste. You should trust her vision." Holidays became battlegrounds. Thanksgiving at Tiffany's parents' house. Christmas split between families, with the most meaningful days somehow always spent with her side. My birthday dinner last year was rescheduled 3 times before being reduced to a quick lunch where both James and Tiffany spent most of the time on their phones. Through it all, I kept smiling, kept trying. I didn't want to be the reason for any tension. I wanted James to be happy. But inside, I was withering from loneliness and the pain of watching my only child slip away from me, one canceled plan at a time. Tuesday started like any ordinary school day. I arrived early to prepare for my 2nd grade class, set up our science project materials, and chatted with Marge, the teacher, next door. Around 10, I felt a slight headache coming on, but brushed it off. Teaching doesn't leave much room for personal discomfort. By lunchtime, the headache had intensified, and I noticed my left arm felt strangely heavy. Still, I pushed through. After school, we had a faculty meeting scheduled to discuss the upcoming spring festival. 20 minutes into Principal Wilson's presentation about budget allocations, the room began to spin. "Opal, are you okay?" "You look pale," Linda from the art department whispered. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. The last thing I remember was the strange sensation of the floor rushing up to meet me, and concerned voices calling my name. I later learned that Linda caught me before my head hit the ground. The school nurse was called, immediately followed by an ambulance. My colleagues told me how the children waiting for after-school pickup watched with wide, frightened eyes as I was wheeled out on a stretcher. Apparently, little Sophie from my class cried and asked if I was going to heaven like her grandpa. At the hospital, doctors suspected a mild stroke. The emergency room was a flurry of activity. Blood tests, brain scans, doctors asking questions I couldn't fully comprehend through the fog of fear and confusion. "We need to contact your family," a nurse with kind eyes told me. "Who should we call?" "James," I managed to whisper. "My son." I gave them his number, watching as the nurse dialed. No answer. She tried again. Nothing. A third time. Voicemail. "Sometimes people don't answer numbers they don't recognize," she reassured me. "We'll leave a message and try again soon." An hour later, they finally reached him. I was drifting in and out of consciousness, but I heard the nurse explaining my condition, emphasizing that while I was stable, the situation had been serious. James promised to come right away. When I fully regained consciousness, my first question was whether my son had arrived. The nurse checked her watch and frowned slightly. "Not yet, but I'm sure he's on his way." 2 hours passed, then 4. Night fell. Every time the door opened, my heart leapt, hoping to see James's face. But it was always a nurse or doctor. I tried calling him myself, but my phone had died in my purse. "Could I borrow your phone?" I asked a young nurse named Sarah, "just to check on my son." She handed me her personal cell. I dialed James's number, which I knew by heart. It went straight to voicemail. I tried the house phone. No answer. I even tried Tiffany's cell. Nothing. The worst part wasn't the physical pain or the fear of my medical condition. It was lying alone in that hospital bed, realizing that the person I loved most in this world, the child I had carried and raised and devoted my life to, couldn't be bothered to show up during what might have been my final hours. "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation," Sarah said, squeezing my hand as she took back her phone. "Try to rest." But I couldn't rest. Every beep of the hospital machinery reminded me of how utterly alone I was. The kind gestures from the medical staff only highlighted the absence of the one person who should have been there. As midnight approached, I finally accepted the truth. James wasn't coming. By the next morning, doctors had confirmed a minor stroke. Fortunately, I had received prompt medical attention, minimizing the potential damage. They explained I'd need a few days of observation followed by some physical therapy. I was incredibly lucky, they said. Lucky. The word felt hollow as I entered my second day in the hospital with still no sign of James. "Would you like to use my iPad to pass the time?" Sarah, who had returned for the morning shift, offered. "You can watch something or check your email." I gratefully accepted, initially just browsing news sites to distract myself. Then, almost automatically, my fingers navigated to Facebook. I rarely use social media, but I had an account to see photos of former students and distant relatives. What I found made my blood run cold. There, posted just hours after I had been admitted to the hospital, was a photo of James and Tiffany at an upscale restaurant downtown. They were smiling broadly, champagne glasses raised in celebration. Tiffany looked radiant in a new dress, clearly enjoying her birthday dinner. The timestamp showed it was posted at 8:42 p.m., well after the hospital had reached James with news of my condition. But it wasn't the photo that shattered my heart. It was Tiffany's caption, "Perfect birthday celebration with my amazing husband. So grateful he chose me tonight instead of rushing off to deal with yet another emergency. Some people will do anything for attention, even ruining special occasions. Sorry, not sorry, but the drama queen routine is getting old. Hashtag boundaries. Hatch self-care. Hatch no guilt." The post had dozens of likes and sympathetic comments. Friends of Tiffany's chimed in with support. "You deserve to have your birthday without interruptions." "Good for James for putting his wife first for once." Some mothers just can't accept they're not the center of attention anymore. But the comment that truly broke me was from my own son. "Thanks for understanding, babe. You're right, it's always something. Happy birthday to my beautiful wife." I scrolled further, discovering this wasn't the first time I'd been the subject of Tiffany's posts. There were thinly veiled references to me going back months, complaints about intrusive family members, jokes about needy parents, and eye-rolling stories about my supposed demands for attention. In their version of reality, I wasn't a mother who had given them a rent-free home and respected their space. I wasn't a woman who had backed away and swallowed her loneliness to give them room to build their marriage. I was a burden, a nuisance, a drama queen who had the inconsideration to have a stroke on Tiffany's birthday. I read every comment, every cruel word, feeling each one like a physical blow. In my entire life, including losing my husband, I had never felt so betrayed. The iPad slipped from my trembling hands onto the hospital blanket as tears finally came. Not delicate, dignified tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs that brought a nurse running to my room. "Mrs. Harrison, are you in pain? Should I call the doctor?" "No," I managed to say through my tears. "No, it's not that kind of pain." But in truth, it was a pain far worse than anything my stroke had caused. On the third day, while I was meeting with a physical therapist, the door to my hospital room swung open. James stood there looking irritated rather than concerned. "Mom," he said flatly. No hug, no apology for his absence, no questions about my condition. The physical therapist excused herself, giving us privacy. The silence that followed her departure was deafening. "You finally decided to show up," I said quietly. James sighed dramatically. "Look, I'm here now, okay? Work's been crazy and Tiffany wasn't feeling well after her birthday dinner." "I saw the post, James." His expression shifted from annoyed to defensive. "What post?" "Tiffany's Facebook post. About her birthday. About me being a drama queen who ruins special occasions." James's face hardened. "You shouldn't be snooping on social media. Those were private thoughts." "Private? It was public enough for 57 people to like it, including you." "Mom, you're overreacting. Tiffany was just venting. She had been planning that birthday dinner for weeks. Do you know how hard it was to get those reservations?" I stared at my son, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time. The kind, thoughtful boy I'd raised was unrecognizable in this man who stood before me, defending his wife's cruelty while I lay in a hospital bed. "I had a stroke, James. The doctors called you immediately. You promised to come right away." "I waited all night." He shrugged. "They said you were stable. It wasn't like you were dying or anything." Those words struck me like physical blows. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm despite the monitor beside me showing my elevated heart rate. "Why are you really here today, James? It's clearly not out of concern for me." He hesitated, then sat in the chair beside my bed. "Actually, there is something we need to discuss. Tiffany and I have been thinking about our future, making some plans." "What kind of plans?" "We've decided it's time to sell the house." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "Sell what house?" "The house. Our house. The market's hot right now, and we could get a great price. We've already talked to a real estate agent. They think we could list it next month." "Our house," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "You mean my house? The house that is in my name, that your father left to me?" James had the audacity to look annoyed. "Mom, don't be difficult. You know we've been living there for almost a year. We've put a lot of work into updating it. That outdated place is actually worth something now, thanks to Tiffany's design skills. You told me you were staying there temporarily, to save for your own place. Plans change. Look, we can use the money from the sale to get you set up in a nice assisted living facility. Clearly you can't take care of yourself anymore. This stroke proves it." The monitor beside me began beeping more rapidly as my pulse skyrocketed. A nurse poked her head in, looking concerned, but I waved her away. "Let me understand this correctly," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "You ignored the hospital's calls while I was having a stroke. You chose your wife's birthday dinner over checking on your critically ill mother. You let her publicly mock me online. And now you want to sell my house out from under me and put me in a nursing home." "Assisted living," James corrected, as if the terminology was the issue. "And you're being dramatic again. This is exactly what Tiffany means. Everything has to be a crisis with you." In that moment, something inside me broke. Or perhaps it finally mended. The fog of maternal devotion that had blinded me for so long lifted, and I saw with perfect clarity what my son had become. "I think you should leave, James. Mom, be reasonable. We need to discuss this. The real estate agent needs access to— Get out." My voice was stronger than it had been in years. "Get out of my room right now." James stood, his face twisted with frustration. This is exactly why we can't have a normal conversation. You're impossible to deal with. Call me when you're thinking rationally." As he stormed out, I pressed my call button. When the nurse arrived, I asked for something I should have requested days ago. "I need to make some important calls, and I need a good lawyer." After James left, I spent hours staring at the ceiling, processing the painful reality of my situation. The social worker assigned to discharge planning, Denise, came by to discuss my options for recovery. "Do you have someone who can help you at home for the first few weeks?" she asked gently. I laughed bitterly. "I thought I did. I was wrong." Something in my tone made her pause. "Mrs. Harrison, would you like to talk about what's going on? Sometimes family situations get complicated during health crises." For the first time, I poured out the whole story to someone: the house, Tiffany's manipulations, James's betrayal, and now their plan to sell my home without my consent. Denise listened without judgment, then took off her professional hat for a moment. "Mrs. Harrison, I'm not supposed to give personal advice, but as one woman to another, don't let them do this to you. If that house is in your name, they can't legally sell it." That conversation was the catalyst I needed. As soon as Denise left, I called Thomas Wilson, the attorney who had handled Robert's estate and had been our family lawyer for 20 years. "Opal, I heard about your health scare. How are you feeling?" Thomas's familiar voice brought me unexpected comfort. "Physically, I'm recovering. Emotionally, I need your help, Thomas." I explained the situation, including James and Tiffany's plan to sell my house. Thomas's response was immediate and reassuring. "They absolutely cannot sell your house without your signature. The property is solely in your name. James has no legal claim to it whatsoever. They've already contacted a real estate agent. That agent should have verified ownership before proceeding. This is highly irregular and potentially fraudulent if they've misrepresented ownership." We spent the next hour developing a plan. Thomas would send a formal cease and desist letter to both James and the real estate agency they'd contacted. He would also prepare paperwork to legally evict James and Tiffany from the property, giving them the standard 30 days notice. "What about selling the house myself?" I asked. "Is that something you want to do?" I considered the question carefully. The house held precious memories, but now it also represented my own naivety and James's betrayal. "Yes, I think it is, but on my terms, not theirs." Thomas put me in touch with Sandra Miller, a reputable real estate agent he'd worked with before. I called her from my hospital bed and we had a preliminary discussion about the market value and selling process. "Based on the location and size, your home could be worth significantly more than average for your neighborhood, especially if it has the original architectural details intact," Sandra explained. I thought of all the updates Tiffany had been making and winced. "Some changes have been made, but the bones are good. I can come assess it as soon as you're ready. When will you be discharged?" "Tomorrow, hopefully, but I can't go back to that house." There was another call I needed to make. Martha Klein had been my best friend since college. We'd stood beside each other through marriages, childbirths, career challenges, and Robert's death. I hadn't leaned on her much lately, trying to handle my increasing isolation from James on my own. "Opal, thank goodness the school called about what happened. I've been so worried." Hearing Martha's voice released something in me, and I found myself crying again. "Martha, I need a place to stay when I get out of here, just for a little while. Don't be ridiculous. You're coming straight to my house, and you'll stay as long as you need. No arguments." That night, for the first time since my stroke, I slept peacefully. I had a plan. I had support. And most importantly, I had found my backbone again. The next morning, I made one more call to my sister Angela in Florida. We'd always been close despite the distance, talking weekly by phone. She had been trying to convince me to move closer to her for years. "Maybe it's time I took you up on that offer," I told her after explaining everything. "Once the house sells and all this is settled. My guest room is waiting for you, sis, and I know a wonderful neurologist here who can continue your care." For the first time in years, I felt a sense of possibility instead of loss. This wasn't how I expected my life to unfold, but perhaps it wasn't ending. Perhaps it was finally beginning again. Martha picked me up from the hospital the following morning. The doctors had cleared me for discharge with instructions for follow-up care and therapy. I'd need to rest and recover, but there was no significant permanent damage from the stroke. "You look determined." Martha commented as she drove me to her home. I know that look. You're planning something. I'm taking back control, I replied simply. Within hours of settling into Martha's guest room, I received a call from Thomas. He had sent the formal eviction notice to James and Tiffany, giving them 30 days to vacate the property. They've received it, he confirmed. And, as expected, James is not taking it well. He's threatening legal action. On what grounds? He's claiming verbal promises and sweat equity from renovations. It's all nonsense legally, but be prepared for some emotional manipulation. Thomas wasn't wrong. James called almost immediately after, his voice tight with anger. What the hell is this eviction notice, Mom? You can't just throw us out of our home. It's not your home, James. It never was. I allowed you to stay there temporarily, and now that arrangement is ending. Because of one missed hospital visit, you're really going to punish us like this. His attempt to minimize the situation only strengthened my resolve. This isn't about punishment, it's about consequences. You and Tiffany made plans to sell my property without my consent. You discussed putting me in assisted living without consulting me. You called me a drama queen for having a stroke on Tiffany's birthday. Tiffany was upset. She didn't mean, I'm not interested in excuses, James. You have 30 days to find a new place to live. Mom, be reasonable. The housing market is impossible right now. We can't find anything in 30 days. You seemed confident enough about the real estate market when you were planning to sell my house. Figure it out. I hung up my hand, trembling, but my mind clear. 2 days later, I went with Thomas and Sandra to inspect the house. James and Tiffany were both at work, which was intentional. I needed to see the property without emotional confrontation. Walking through the front door was like entering a stranger's home. Almost everything had been changed. The warm, honey-colored hardwood floors Robert had lovingly refinished were now covered with trendy gray laminate. The kitchen cabinets had been painted a stark white, the vintage hardware replaced with modern pulls. Family photos had been removed, including the gallery wall that had chronicled James's childhood. They've made some interesting choices, Sandra commented diplomatically, but the location is still excellent and the structure is sound. In the master bedroom, I discovered that Tiffany had converted my walk-in closet into a glam room with a makeup vanity and clothing racks. In Robert's old office, now used as a guest room, I found boxes stacked in the corner. Curiosity led me to peek inside one. My heart sank. These were family heirlooms and mementos that had been removed from display. Photo albums, Robert's collection of vintage baseball cards, the handmade quilt from my grandmother, all boxed up and shoved away like worthless junk. Are you all right, Opal? Thomas asked, seeing my expression. I will be, I promised, closing the box. Let's continue. Sandra was thorough in her assessment, taking notes and photos. Despite the cosmetic changes, this is still a very desirable property. The market in this area is extremely active right now. I believe we can list significantly higher than what your son was probably planning. By the end of the week, we had the house listed. I chose not to inform James or Tiffany directly. They would discover it when potential buyers began requesting viewings. The confrontation came sooner than expected. That weekend, I received a call from a furious Tiffany. How dare you list our house without telling us? We came home to find a lockbox on the door and a for sale sign in the yard. It's my house, Tiffany. I'm selling it just like you and James planned to do. The difference is I actually have the legal right to do so. We've put thousands into renovating this place. We deserve that equity. You were living there rent-free. Consider those renovations your rent payment, though I never asked for or wanted most of them. James is devastated. She tried changing tactics. This home means everything to him. It's where he grew up. If it meant so much to him, perhaps he should have shown up when his mother was in the hospital. Perhaps he shouldn't have liked your post calling me a drama queen. Perhaps he shouldn't have planned to ship me off to a nursing home. It's assisted living, and it would have been a really nice place. I almost laughed at her indignation. Goodbye, Tiffany. Please make sure the house is presentable for the open house tomorrow. The first offer came in 3 days later. A young family with 2 small children who fell in love with the backyard and the neighborhood's excellent school district. Their offer was well above asking price with a request for a quick closing. James made one last desperate attempt, showing up at Martha's house unannounced. Mom, please, he begged on the doorstep. Don't do this. We can work something out. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. In his eyes, I could see not remorse, but fear. Fear of losing the free housing, the financial windfall he'd counted on, the easy path he'd planned. The house is under contract, James. The new family moves in next month. They have a little girl who will be in second grade. She's excited about the treehouse in the backyard, the one your father built for you. So that's it. You're choosing strangers over your own son. No, James, you chose Tiffany over me long ago. I'm simply choosing myself now. I closed the door gently but firmly, ending that chapter of my life with the quiet click of a latch. 6 months have passed since I sold the house and moved to Florida. My small bungalow is just 10 minutes from Angela's home, walking distance to a community center where I've started teaching art classes for seniors, and a short drive to the beach where I watch the sunset most evenings. The stroke left me with a slight weakness in my left hand, but physical therapy has helped tremendously. My neurologist says my recovery has been remarkable, partly due to reduced stress. I believe it. I still receive occasional angry texts from James. Sometimes they're accusatory, "Hope you're enjoying spending our inheritance." Sometimes they attempt guilt. "Dad would be ashamed of how you've treated us." I've stopped responding. Engaging only feeds the narrative that I'm the villain in their story. Last month, Angela's neighbor Frank invited me to dinner. He's a kind widower who loves birdwatching and classic movies. We've been seeing each other regularly since then. It's not a grand romance, but it's gentle companionship that brings joy to my days. At 62, I'm discovering there are still new beginnings to be found. Marge, my former teaching colleague, keeps me updated on school gossip. She mentioned that James called the school once asking for my new contact information. She followed my instructions and didn't share it. I'm not ready for reconciliation. Not until James can acknowledge the truth of what happened and take responsibility for his choices. Do I miss him? Of course. He's my only child. There are days when I see a man his age on the street and my heart clenches with that instinctive maternal love. But I've learned an important lesson through all this loving. Someone doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. Setting boundaries isn't the opposite of love. Sometimes it's the highest form of it. I keep a journal now, writing down my thoughts and experiences. It's therapeutic, helping me process the journey from betrayal to self-reclamation. Last week, I wrote something that feels like the perfect summation of my story. I spent so many years being a mother that I forgot how to be Opal. I gave and gave until giving became my identity. But true generosity isn't martyrdom. It comes from a place of wholeness, not emptiness. By reclaiming my worth, I haven't loved James less. I've simply learned to love myself as well. The door to reconciliation remains unlocked. If James ever truly sees the pain he caused, if he's willing to build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than exploitation, I'll welcome that conversation. Until then, I'm living my life with a lightness I haven't felt in years. Sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't holding on, but knowing when to let go and stand tall in your own truth. I may have lost a son for now, but I found myself again, and that's a victory no one can take away. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to put yourself first after years of putting others before you? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. And remember, it's never too late to write a new chapter in your life story. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to honor your own worth even when it's difficult.